Right, I have a theory that I want to share with you guys. And that theory is that the older we get, the longer the focal length we want to use is. Now, bear with me, there is some logic behind this theory. When I first started out kind of doing videography and photography and dabbling with it at a younger age, it was all about fisheye lenses. It was all about filming and photographing your mates, skateboarding, rollerblading on their bikes, and using as wide a lens as possible to get right up into the action, get really close. And then when I started taking photography a bit more seriously, I went through that Instagram stage of taking Instagram a bit more seriously and used a wide angle lens like this, like a 16-35. Now, it comes with a little bit more reach, but is obviously still a pretty wide lens. And that was because you wanted to get those big, dramatic, vast landscapes with those big, stretched out foregrounds right at the front of the frame, and just make those images look as big and as impressive as possible. And a wide angle lens was definitely the way to do that with landscape photography. And then I matured a little bit more and moved on to a 24-70, again, giving myself a little bit more reach, and also just a great all-round lens. As I started to get older, I wanted to carry less equipment with me, so a lens like this was a great all-rounder. And nowadays, often this is the only lens I take with me when I'm out hiking, kind of does it all. Just taking the 24-70, I think, on this one. The only thing I have with me though is this 24-70mm lens. I've actually recently only been hiking with a 24-70. And then from there, a lot of people move on to a 70-200. Obviously, again, giving yourself some extra reach and giving you the opportunity to get some compression in your landscape images, moving away from that super wide, stretched out foreground look that was really common on Instagram a few years ago. But now, as I'm getting a little older, I think I've finally reached my final form as a photographer. This is the new lens. This guy here. This is a Tamron 150-600 G2. And it's a big boy. And I've never owned a focal length this long before, but I am super looking forward to using it. I think this is gonna open up so many more possibilities for my photography. And maybe with my older knees, it's gonna mean rather than getting up close to the action or hiking a long way, I can just sit around and wait for animals or wait for the light to change and shoot from one place. But let's see what we can do with this lens. And one of those possibilities is, of course, wildlife photography. And there's an abundance of wildlife, obviously, out in the Canadian Rockies, and I see it all the time, like bighorn sheep, elk, the occasional bear, moose, all that kind of stuff. And I've never really had the opportunity to photograph it properly. I've never had a lens this big. I've always been using a 200mm, so it's fantastic to have this focal length, and I can just keep this on the passenger seat of my car and try and get pictures whenever I see wildlife. He's just risen his head. Over here we've got a few elk, and sorry, he just popped his head up for a second there, and I've been waiting a little while for him to do that. But right now I'm actually on the Minnewanka Lake loop. During summer it's a full kind of loop that goes round past Tujac Lake and Minnewanka, and it's a great little spot actually. It's where a lot of tour companies will come out for wildlife spotting in the evenings and in the mornings. Right now in winter part of the road is closed because it's a wildlife corridor, so it's not really a loop. But it's perfect for a day like today. You can see it's relatively grey out, and landscape photography is just not really going to be that much fun on a day like today. You're not really going to get many results. So super stoked to have a lens like this where I can just come out for drives on drearier days, in the evenings, in the mornings, and just hope I find some wildlife. One thing about this lens, and a disadvantage of going for the cheaper lens, I suppose, is that it's f6.3 at the long end. So on a day like today, where it's a bit overcast, coming later into the evening, I am shooting at quite a high ISO, but I don't think that would be too much of a problem because nowadays, I mean, the Lightroom denoise feature is so good that I think I could get away with shooting at a really high ISO, to be honest with you. And I'm doing that because at 600mm, I'm going to get any kind of wobble I put into the lens is going to be pretty evident, and any movement from the animals. So if I shoot at a higher ISO, like 2000, in these lighting conditions, I'm still going to get like 1/400th of a second, which will hopefully be fast enough for these elk. But yeah, relatively confident with that. But again, this was a relatively cheap lens. There is no way I could be affording like an f4 or an f2.8 prime option from Canon, because we're talking big bucks for that stuff. So for now, I think this will have to do. The elk are a little bit distracted. I think they're either heads down, eating in the grass, or trying to get a bit frisky with each other, I think. So I might move on. And again, leave this bad boy on the passenger seat, ready for anything we see. See if we can find anything else, and I can always come back and shoot these guys a bit later on if needs be too. so not necessarily having the best luck down here at Lake Minnewanka. I thought maybe there might be a little bit of bird life or something along the shore here, but it seems a little bit void of life at the moment. But I suppose it's kind of late November. It's pretty cold, pretty windy out here. Maybe a lot of the birds have started disappearing, heading south. But I'm not an expert. This is what I need to learn. I need to learn this stuff if I'm going to maximise this lens for wildlife. And there's another little spot as well that I think might be worth visiting, because it's quite common for the ground squirrels to kind of hang out around there. But again, I'm not really sure if it's going to be too cold or too far into winter to see small little animals like that. Like, are they going to be hibernating? Do they hibernate? So I've definitely got a lot to learn, I think. But yeah, let's jump back in the car and go for a bit more of a drive. So just as I've come back to my car here, I've spotted just a little squirrel in the woods there, sat on a log, munching away. And obviously maybe that's not the most exciting animal you see in the Canadian Rockies, but I'm just about getting close enough with this. And the autofocus on this lens isn't like the best. It's not world-class performance autofocus, but it's pretty good, and it's getting pretty sharp images, I think. He sat in the shade in the woods, so I'm shooting at kind of almost 5,000 ISO, 6,000 ISO, quite high. And hopefully some of those images will come out sharp enough. But like I said, maybe not the most exciting animals for a lot of you, but this is really good fun, just trying to watch him, trying to get those pictures whilst he's kind of eating his snacks sat on the log there. And I think some of them are actually turning out pretty nice. Oh no, there he is. One thing I think I need to do though, invest in some kind of monopod, because this thing is heavy and it's hard to hold it steady at kind of 600mm or anything on the longer end. I think I'm getting a bit of hand wobble in there, so maybe that's the next investment for my new older photography hobby, should we say. Right, that's a squirrel in the bag. Let's see if we can find anything else on the way back out. So down at this little area, I have been here in the past in summer, and there are loads and loads of kind of ground squirrels, prairie dogs. They've got a few different names. And in fact, I've actually tried to film sat in that little hut up there before and not been able to because of their squealing and their shouting to each other was ruining the audio. It was just squeaking every kind of couple of seconds. And you can see now there's lots of their holes all over the place, right? So this is kind of where they live, in all these little holes around and about through here. Maybe there's another one there, maybe that's some kind of a dig. But there's a bunch of them. But obviously now the time that I want them here, they're not here. But again, obviously I've got a lot of questions. Do ground squirrels hibernate? Maybe, probably. Squirrels don't. Ground squirrels probably do? I don't know. And then do elk lie down later on in the evening? Because those ones didn't want to stand up earlier on there. But are they getting ready to go to sleep? Are they resting? I don't know. These are all things I need to find out. But that's been a fun little afternoon, to be honest with you. Like coming out on a bit of a miserable grey day, but still having something to shoot. So the longer lens is really opening up a whole new world of photography for me, which is really cool. And I think there's also going to be a lot more creative possibilities with it as well. And there's a shot that I've had in mind for a little while actually that I often see on a run, and I've always thought to myself that might be really cool if I had a really long focal length, like a 500 or a 600mm. So maybe that could work. So the more observant of you might notice that this section of the video is filmed quite a bit later. You can see we're definitely in the heart of winter right now here in Calgary, in the city. There is snow kind of everywhere. But this shot that I've kind of had in mind for a little while is of the city. And the reason this has taken me so long to shoot and get this is because I want to get the mountains in the background. So from where I'm going to shoot from, I think I can get the city or some city kind of blocks and some lights, and then the mountains in the background, and shooting that with a really long lens could end up looking really good. But what you'll quite often get here is you'll see here in Calgary, there is clear blue skies. It's really nice, and it often is here, to be honest. But in the mountains, it's often grey and cloudy during the winter, and to be able to get clear weather from here all the way to the mountains is pretty tough. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that this morning we have clear enough weather that I can get this shot that I've kind of got in mind.
Now I suppose this morning this is kind of going to be a bit of a proof of concept shot, I suppose, and just trying to get used to shooting with this longer 600mm lens. Like, you might just about be able to see in the distance there, like the mountains running just across the horizon, and there are a couple of buildings that kind of sit between them just over there. Unfortunately, there's no lights on in those buildings right now, but I think there is potential to get some pretty cool landscape shots with such a long lens. And I'm kind of waiting a little bit around here as well, because you might be able to see we're getting a little bit of kind of a pink alpine glow in the sky. So we've got like the buildings, the mountains, the clouds, the alpine glow, and then the sky above. So I think in a 16:9 crop I might be able to get something. But if I wait around a little bit longer, I think the sun will rise up a little bit more kind of in the opposite direction and hopefully cast a little bit of light onto those mountains. And if it does that, that could work pretty nicely. But I've always run up and down this kind of ridgeline here, and you can see those mountains in the background, and I just thought if I could compress them enough with a long enough lens, there might be a shot here.
So when I initially shot these images, I didn't think any of them were turning out any good. It wasn't quite what I had in mind. However, after a quick little edit and seeing them on a larger screen in a good aspect ratio, I think they've actually turned out better than I expected.
So I'm not going to lie, I don't know if any of those shots actually turned out exactly how I imagined this morning. There's actually a lot of atmosphere in the sky, and I haven't really taken that into account, having never really shot with such a long lens before. But yeah, it looks a bit blurry. You can see the rippling of, I suppose, the warmth coming from the sun. And I was up here last night kind of scouting this out, and it didn't appear to have that. So, you know, there's a lot to learn with shooting with a longer lens like this. But the concept is there, the idea is there. And although those images weren't all that exciting this morning, I am super excited to shoot more with this, and it opens up so many more photographic possibilities.
As always, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you on the next video. But in the meantime, be sure to download a Canadian Rockies photography location guide using the QR code on screen or the link in the description below. And go on, watch another video.